everyone, and welcome to the Almost Dropouts podcast. I'm your host, Daivik, and today I have my good friend Siddharth with me. Sid, you want to introduce yourself?
What's up? hello. My name is Siddharth Kumar, and me and Daivik go way back. If you're listening to this, it's probably because you know Daivik, and if you know Daivik, you know me. So I'm currently working as an intern at Apple Inc. I'm working in the manufacturing design department. Outside of that, I go to Waterloo for mechanical engineering. And as a side hobby, hustle, passion, I work in the arts a lot. My background is in theater. I'm now branching into film with one of our other good friends, Vyom, who I'm sure will either be or maybe already has been on this podcast. But yeah, man.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, that's a pretty good summary. Sid also has a YouTube channel, and he's pretty avid on that. So, yeah, I think Sid's pretty unique where he's doing both art and engineering. So, let's talk about that a little bit. So, how's your experiences been? Balancing your pursuit of acting as well as balancing your engineering.
Yeah, man, it's been an interesting game, right? Like, I found. So early on when I started Waterloo, my idea was that I was going to be a Waterloo engineer, right? Which meant that I was going to be the mold of what it meant to be an engineer at the University of Waterloo. And I was going to do the design teams, and I was going to do this and this and this. And I was going to be super good at school. And I really played that game, and I played it with my whole heart. But I was finding that I was very unhappy. Around like after my first co-op into my second semester, after my second co-op, by the time I got to my my first semester, second year, right, I was very unhappy, and I was like, what is going on? Like, I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to do to being happy at Waterloo, but like I'm not at all.
Mm-hmm.
And what I started realizing at that point was like I was denying myself the thing that made me unique, or I think the things that I brought to the table I was somehow discounting, which was always my passion for art and the lessons and the way I communicated with people through that medium. And so what I found by like, how do I put that? I guess what I found while being in engineering is that the deeper and deeper I get into the technical part of engineering, and the deeper and deeper I get into design and all that sort of stuff, the more and more I need art.
Right.
It's like, in order to balance out how crazy technical we can get, you need, like, for me, I need that balancing act. I need that creative outlet.
Yeah.
So, my first foray into that, like when we were at Waterloo, was I joined the eng play, just the engineering play. And, it's a small, kind of crappy, but funny, like, play.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, it's not meant to take itself seriously. It's not meant to be like a great piece of theater. It's just a bunch of engineers who get together and we make theater.
Yeah.
And coming out of my background, like, you've known me forever, right? I was very lucky to go to a high school that was very, very artistically driven and very good at the arts.
Shout out FFCA, but yeah.
But like, it was cool because going to FFCA, what happened was that I started in junior high in sports and wrestling and rugby and stuff, and I joined the drama club, or I joined One Act, which was like the main thing at our school, just cause, right?
Yeah.
Just to see a change in pace, and that really quickly took over my life and became something that was very important to me. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go to provincials and like perform at a provincial level and bring home some hardware for the school. And at that point, I realized how important it was to me. But when I got to graduating, because I did that for my grade 10, 11, 12 year, and grade 11 and 12, we won best play. I won best actor and stuff. And, I don't say that to brag. I say it to just be like, that's kind of where I was. And so when I got to grade 12, the question in front of me was, okay, like, what do you want to do now? Because I had a lot of people who in the field of art telling me, you should come out and do this.
Yeah.
Like, you should act. You should be in theater. And at that point, I made the decision to go into engineering for myself, really. I'm really lucky that I came from a family, like, my parents, my family, they're really open. Always been very of whatever my endeavor
100%.
was. but like by the time I got to grade 12, the question for me was, what do I want to go to school to do? You know, if I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
spend 4 years and a whole bunch of money in educating myself in something, what do I want to go to school for?
Yeah,
Because yeah, at that point it was just I was either going to go to theater school, film school, or I was going to go into engineering. Those are the two things I was tossing up between.
yeah. No, I mean that I mean that's a hard. Of course, first like that's a hard decision to think about. Like what do you want to do for a long term? But I think one thing that's really interesting that you sort of brought up here is a lot of people think it's a choice that you have to choose one or the other.
Mm.
But I think that's what happens. A lot of engineering kids, they forego that passion that they had beforehand too, for engineering. But I truly believe there is a place where you can balance for both of them. Of course, one is going to take some type of notional, like some type of importance for the other at certain
Mm-hmm.
times. But I don't think there's this hard thing that you have to let go of the passions you had in the past, which I think like I know that's something that a lot of people like, of course, but that's seriously something that I see a lot of engineering kids these days that think they have to let go of these old passions that they had in engineering. They have to focus all their attention on that in order to succeed. When a balance, I believe a balance will actually let them succeed more than just focusing on engineering in general.
No, yeah, no, dude. Like for like 100% agree. And it's. I think it's interesting. Is I think it's so true. I don't think you're at all exaggerating when you say that. Like at the amount of students I've met who have been in similar positions to me, like kids who you're in class with, and then when you really get to know them, you're like, dude, you are a phenomenal visual artist. Like you're a phenomenal painter, or you're an unbelievable singer, right? What ends up happening is that when you meet people who are super high achieving in any field, right? And credit is like to give credit where credit is due. If you're at Waterloo for engineering, there's something to be proud of there. Even though I know that the common, what's the word? The common like ethos in Waterloo is like, it's not that big a deal and stuff. Like, no, it is. Like, it's something to be proud of. It's a difficult school to get into,
Yeah.
and you're an intelligent person if you've got into Waterloo. The thing is, so many of our peers are like multi-talented people, right? And when you're getting into Waterloo, you're filling out like the AIF and all that sort of stuff, and that means something. So it's not unique to find people who are talented artists who have chosen to go into engineering because for whatever reasons. For some of them it's financial, for some of them it's passion. For me it was interest. For me it was genuinely like, okay, like I said, if I'm going to school for something, I know that I can do film and theater on the side while pursuing engineering, but I don't think I can do engineering on the side while pursuing film and theater. That's ultimately how I made my decision. What would I regret more?
Yep.
Yeah.
No.
And so, but yeah, man, I think there's a lot to be said about the idea that you should. I don't even think that that it's a mistake. I think you just absolutely should not, because that character people have of an engineer, like a nerd, like the person who doesn't have people skills and they don't know how to converse with others. Where does that come from? That comes from this perspective of people trying to fit into the mold of what an engineer is. But really, in our job, a lot of the engineers are people who actually demonstrate a lot of that you gain through the other fields and passions, right? Like the amount that my ability to communicate that was cultivated through acting and film and theater and directing and all that sort of stuff, those strong communication skills honestly taken me further in engineering than almost anything else.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I don't think people realize that, right? And I think that's what it is. Like they get caught up in this notion. They see that people, they're getting these internships at these companies, they're getting this much salary or whatever, but and they think that the only way to achieve that is just by completely dedicating yourself to engineering, which may be true, but at the same time, I think there is a balance to be found, even with them.
Yeah,
Even in that sense. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes a lot of students make coming in.
100%. I think like Like if I could go back to younger me, or like even if you have people who listen to this podcast who want to get into Waterloo or stuff, my biggest almost plea honestly to them is that like do not give up the things that are going to get you into Waterloo once you're there, right?
Yeah.
For me, like one of the big things I always talk to younger students or like our friends who want to get in is like, dude, the thing that got me into Waterloo was that, yeah, I was a great student and all that stuff, but like it was exactly this. It was theater, it was film, it was all of this stuff. But once I got into Waterloo, I got sucked into this perspective that you have to be a certain way. And as long as I tried to like beat myself into that mold, I was not successful at all. Not personally, I was deeply unfulfilled. And from a education and job perspective, I was not doing well. I was like not doing well.
Yeah.
You know, from my internships, I got like, my second internship, I was working the night shift for this company, bro. They literally put the intern on the graveyard shift, and my job was.
Yo, if you want to hear about crazy co-op experiences, nobody is better than Siddharth Kumar.
Dude, my second internship, I was working the midnight shift at some company in Vaughan, right? And my job was literally to take their physical inventory upstairs, which was like thousands of parts, just random mechanical parts covered in like 10 years of dust, and digitize it. And so for 2 weeks, I would start work at 8 p.m., work till 6 a.m., wearing a dust mask, which I had to ask for because I was like, dude, my lungs are going to collapse.
Like, nah.
I was like, my lungs are going to collapse. Yeah. And then the only reason I stopped working that is because one night I was caught speeding on my way to work at midnight, and I almost got arrested, and my car got impounded.
There you go, guys. You know what happens when you don't let your passions through in Waterloo.
So yeah, that was a wake up call for me, dude. When I was staring down the cops in like -40 weather, and my car was being impounded, and the cop was telling me I had to walk the rest of the way to work at 2 a.m., I was like, "What the hell am I doing? Like, what is my life right now? I hate this job. I am unhappy personally. I'm not doing anything I love. I'm not even doing engineering for the reasons I came into it, right? Like the reason I came into engineering because I have a deep passion for movement and motion and understanding it, right? And I was like, I'm working a job that's not related to that. I'm all this stuff. Like, where did I go wrong? I was doing all the right things, but I'm in the wrong place. And that's kind of when I decided, literally, while staring the cops down that night, I was like, and I mean, there's a whole other part of that story, which is to say that my hair was down to my shoulders. I hadn't shaved in 3 weeks. And when the cop pulled me over, I didn't have my license on me. And I was driving in Alberta like
Yeah, they thought he escaped out of prison.
No, straight up. The cop thought I stole the car because it was an Alberta license plate. I didn't have my license with me. I did not look like at all someone who was a respectable citizen, right? And this dude pulled me over and he's like, "What's your name?" And I told him my name, but this cop kept thinking my last name was my first name for some reason. So every time he put me into the system, he couldn't find me. So this dude straight had me spread on the car. Like he was ready to cuff me. Dog was ready to put me away. And I was like, really not following your heart? And you go to jail? This is a big price to pay, man.
At least you were closer to being a criminal than Drake will ever be in his life.
Dude, I was straight up, at that moment is when I was like, all right, this isn't working. I got to change something up. Yeah. And so what I did was, you know, and you were a big part of this decision because I remember talking to you about it. And I made a decision that a lot of people at the time disagreed with or were scared about, which is I took my next co-op off.
Yep.
Which is another thing that a lot of kids at Waterloo are terrified of doing, and rightfully so. But for me, I realized that given how unhappy I was, I needed I need to go with my gut, man. I needed to follow my heart. And as cheesy as that sounds, I 100% stand by that. And I realized I wasn't getting jobs I cared about. I wasn't doing well in school. I almost got arrested at this point. So I was like, all right, let's just, like, what do I have to lose? I know I'm going to flunk out of Waterloo in the next semester because of how little I care. So for my third co-op, what I did is before my third co-op, after that harrowing experience, for my next semester in school, I joined the engineering play. That was my first semester.
Yep.
And dude, I felt like alive. I felt happier than I'd felt in the past 2 years at Waterloo. Mm-hmm. And then making that decision, going with my gut for that decision, gave me the confidence to be like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take one more step. And so what I did was what was going on was that I was consciously flunking my interviews because I didn't have the balls to admit to myself that I didn't want a job, right? I was too scared, which makes sense, right? Like, again, you're at Waterloo. There's the pressure of like being the perfect Waterloo student. And I didn't want to admit to people that, like, dude, I just don't want to work. Like, I don't want to do another job. I need some time to figure myself out. And what I was doing, I was going into interviews, not shaving, not cutting my hair, wearing like crappy clothes. And they'd ask me, like, they'd be like, tell me about yourself. And I'd be like, yeah, my name's Siddharth. And then just like awkward silence. And like, again, at that point, I was like, dude, you just gotta be honest with yourself. Sid.
Yeah.
So I took the term off and I came back home. And what I did is I went into the form of engineering that I really was passionate and I cared about, which was I just started cold calling labs around Calgary, our home city. And I got work at the University of Calgary in the human performance lab studying biomechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And I conducted research into lower limb biomechanics and at a world-leading lab, which I didn't know at the time. But the professor I was working with, Dr. Ben Onig, he was like the godfather of lower limb biomechanics. And I just by emailing, dude, just by going with my gut, I ended up getting a job there. And it was unpaid, but they gave me a project all to myself. And I was presenting to this guy who's like a big deal. And then I got to set my own hours. So what I did is in the mornings, I'd go work at the lab. And at night, I pulled on some of those contacts that I had from my previous work in theater. And I was working in theater again. And I performed in my first ever like professional show. And I got incredible feedback from that. Yep. And at that point, like that is the point I look back in and can put my finger on that, like, I don't exaggerate when I say that changed my life. From that point onwards, I kind of committed to going with my gut and pursuing not the traditional mold of the Waterloo engineer, but pursuing the sort of person I wanted to be, the sort of engineer I wanted to be. And dude, since then, my life's been on an upward trajectory. Like it's been going great, you know. I took that co-op. My very next co-op was in machine design, which was something at the time I was very interested in. And during that interview for machine design at a company called Highbar, which has recently been bought out by Tesla, the interviewer straight up asked me, he's like, hey, so what happened on your last co-op? And I had all these different answers prepped in my head, right? I was like, oh, I'll tell him this, I'll tell him this. I looked him in the eye and I was like, hey, man, I don't know if this is what you're supposed to say, but I just hated engineering. And I just told him my story. Okay. And I had a normal conversation with him, and he hired me on the spot. And like it was something out of a fairy tale. He hired me on the spot, and then I got that job, and then that job. During the whole time during semesters, then I was just doing the engineering play, and when I was off semester, I was trying to do whatever I could in the artistic space that made me feel good. Yeah. I started the YouTube channel, and then one thing led to another, and I had 6 interviews with Apple, and now I'm working at Apple, man. So like, I'm working at Apple. I'm working on a lot of film and theater on the side. Like my life has just got so much better because I had the courage to make the decision that I was going to follow my own gut, my own heart, and try and be who I wanted to be. And B, because I had phenomenal support around me, right? Like my boys, like you guys, like you were a huge part of that. My family, I was very fortunate.
Yeah. No, and I think that's like, a really interesting thing you mentioned, like, you know, with the high bar interview, when you were straight up and honest with it, I think being in touch with yourself is a big thing that, you know, seems pretty obvious, but a lot of people struggle with, including myself. Like, it's just being in touch with what you actually want versus what other people want.
Dude, it's like that Bruce Lee quote, right? When Bruce Lee said, to know your enemy, know yourself.
Yep.
It's so true. Like in an interview, if you go onto YouTube and you type in, how to do an interview or whatever, you always see all these like super rigid, fake alpha male type people who are like, do this, how do you sell me this pen and all this? And it's like, my experience has been like, not at all, dude. Don't do any of that shit. Like, that's stupid. Just go in and be genuine. Put your stats on the table and talk. People want to hire, like for my Apple job, man, I don't know if I was the most qualified, but what I did is, at the end of my interview, the guy was in a rush, who is now my boss. The guy was in a rush. He was headed out. He's like, hey, you have any questions for me? And it was stupid, right? It goes against all conventional wisdom. But I just said, give me 2 seconds. And he was like, okay. And I said, listen, man, I know I might not be the best. I know I might not always have the answer, but I am the guy who knows how to find the answer. And you hire me, and I promise you, I will get you the answers. And it was like a total pursuit of happiness, like bullet from a movie scene. But it's like, what do you have to lose? Do you want it? Do you want it or not? Like, just go with your gut. And my gut said, be ballsy, be dramatic and obnoxious about it. And I did, and it worked out really well for me. Now I got the job, and I'm working in a really cool space now.
Yeah, no, and that's it's good to hear, man. I mean, thank you for sharing all of that. That's a pretty good background on, your journey until now, and some of the stuff you're doing with art and engineering, and some of the lessons you've learned coming all the way here. So I guess the next follow-up question after this is, what do you think the future holds for you now that you've experienced all of this, with engineering and art? What direction do you want to go now?
Yeah, man, that's the $1 million question, right? Like, you just asked me, like, what do I want to do with my life?
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, a general idea, I guess, like, or some ideas you might have for the future. Let's say it like that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so my thing is that I firmly believe that you can pursue everything you care about if you're willing to put in the work and you're willing to really like try. There's nothing I would hate more than regretting something. So I definitely like planning on finishing my engineering degree and going through with that. I think for me, like I've said, it's all about going with my gut. And right now, I know my field of interest within engineering is biomedical or biomechatronics. So I want to pursue for my next couple co-ops something in that space, perhaps. And if not that, I would love to pursue a more design. Like, I'm looking for the intersection of engineering and art. And a lot of that for me, I've found in industrial design or, just the design space in general. I'm really inspired by like the MIT Media Lab, where people like Hugh Hare and like Neri Oxman, two of like my engineering idols, work. I would love to kind of pursue that. But on the flip side of that, if I'm also being honest, is that I fully intend to really go after art full swing. I think so my plan is kind of like, I'm going to gas out as much as I can within my degree. And then after my degree, I kind of want to take a year or so and just go full into art, see what that space is really like and pursue it and kind of make a decision from there, right? It's very possible that I'll do a year and a half of working in art and I'll find out it's not for me, or I'll do it and I'll realize this is exactly what I want to do. And then I'd be okay with leaving engineering behind, right? Because I've completed that journey.
Yeah, and I think like one interesting, like a lot of people feel like, if they're like you're saying with the whole year thing, they have to choose one or the other. They have to make a decision because they'd be wasting a year, wasting a year. But that, like, you're going to be 22 or 23. Like, you still have so many years ahead of you that a 1 year honestly does not make that much of a difference. But if like 1 year doesn't make that much of a difference, meaning like if you whatever you decide to do in the future, but to help you decide what you want to do, that year can be everything. and it can bring so much clarity that you need in order to succeed in whatever you decide to do.
100%. Yeah. Like, I think the biggest lie that we are fed as a generation is that you need to be married, have 2 kids, and a stable job by the time you're 30. Like,
Yeah.
I think that is a devastating lie. And I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, society is so destructive and all that stuff. I'm not blaming anyone specifically. If anything, I think I blame myself for believing that. But dude, I would rather be 30 with a failed, like, I would rather have failed at the things I really wanted to try and have to restart at 30 than be 30 with the stable job and all that stuff, and always know in the back of my head, like, always have the question of what if.
Yeah. What if is a big one.
Yeah.
That is one thing that haunts me as well. I think a lot of people, but like just being haunted by it versus actually acting, don't have to have those questions, are two completely separate things. And I think it's important to be in touch.
Yeah, man. I think like you have to. So here's the thing, right? Again, I'm not saying this from a perspective of like, oh, holier than thou. Like, I get how terrifying it is. I live on that edge every day. Like, if I choose to walk away from engineering, I understand I'm walking away from a potential 6-figure job at like 22 years old. Like, I get that. And I'll be the first to be like, it's terrifying, dude. Like, it's terrifying. But it's one of those things where it's like, it's scary, but you just do it anyway, right? Like, what are your options? And I'm not saying that it's the right path for everyone or any of that. I'm just saying that for me, my reality is that I don't want to, exactly like you said, I don't want to leave with a what if. And when I think about it, it's that I know I'm a clever guy. I know I can work harder than almost anyone in the room. And I think if you're truly passionate and you care about the things you're doing, then like, do that, dude. As long as you're willing to work, time off, quote unquote, isn't time off. It's you're making something of yourself, right? You're becoming something. And that's a worthy pursuit when you're 20 years old, man. In my opinion, at least.
No, I'm completely on that boat too. I mean, for me, like similarly, like after school, I want to do a startup because that's been my dream since I was a kid. And same thing, like it's really hard to walk away from a 6-figure salary to potentially a startup with no money for a year, and like, you know, it's probably a 95% failure rate based on statistics. But like, if that's what I want to do, then that's what I want to do. That's, for me, it's very clear to me that like is $100K a year worth me throwing that away? For me personally, it isn't. And I know that later on I can pick back up if I need to. I can pick up good work later on, even if I'm behind on that salary trend, I guess. That's okay with me, as long as I can do the thing I want to do and give it at least a shot.
I think that's man. I resonate with that, dude. It's about, I think, more than doing what you want to do. I think it's like, it's character building, right? It's all, in my perspective, character building. It's becoming someone you want to be. And do you want to be 30 and look back and say, I wasn't the sort of person who had the courage to like live like that for a bit? And I'm not saying it's easy. I understand, dude. I know how terrifying it is. But it's like the answer is, you know, you have to look into your own heart and answer that for yourself.
No, I agree. All right, let's transition a little. I think one really interesting thing you said in the middle there is the intersection between art and technology. And I think that's an area a lot of people, especially in the sciences, don't think about, how much of an impact art makes on technology. And likewise too.
100%. Yeah, man.
Like for technology, for art as well. But, you know, it's so interesting to me. Like, there's so many applications of art in technology. Like, have you ever actually just stared at your iPhone? Just like, it is so immaculately designed, and it's designed to evoke a feeling. And I know people are going to be like, what are you talking about? But there's a certain design language that the engineers at Apple have used that is meant so you invoke, so you feel something when you're touching, every time you look at your phone or touch your phone. And ultimately, that's, like, in my books, it qualifies as art, because for me, art is when you're trying to invoke some type of human feeling or capture some type of emotion through a medium. And I think in general, like there's a lot of different areas where both technology and art fall together just like this. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
No, man, I think like as someone who works at Apple, let me tell you firsthand that is a very serious, constant conversation that happens within the organization about how does our product feel? How does our product, how do people feel about it? How does it invoke emotion? What is the story? Storytelling is a huge part of the culture. And that, none of this isn't like NDA, like this is like known information, but it's a really constant conversation at every level of the organization. It's not just the designers, like us as, I work in manufacturing design. Basically my job is figuring out how do you actually build an iPhone. Once the designers have designed it and once, product design is figured out where all the nuts and bolts go, my job is to say, okay, how do we actually put 1 million of these on a production line and get them out the door type of thing, right? And the fact that at my level, we constantly have that conversation, right? Every presentation is a story. It's a really serious consideration. I think that's what sets the company apart from other companies, and that's why people resonate with it, right? And so kind of talking on a broader scale about that, I think what people fail to recognize sometimes, especially in our space, in like the engineering space, is that technology moves humanity forward, right? Technology moves us forward as a civilization, but art moves culture forward. And anyone who discounts culture is not fundamentally aware of how important or what a unbelievable influence it plays on them. And I say that as someone who myself didn't recognize that until fairly recently in my life. Like, I always thought culture was something kind of separate. And now I'm realizing that it is literally like the other half of what gives life meaning, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what were you saying?
No, exactly.
What were you saying? I cut you off.
No. Yeah, no, but actually that's really interesting because I think one really interesting point about it is technology has always been a medium for art to live on. And technology comes and goes. But if you actually look at it very closely, art lives on for thousands of years. If not, art lives on forever. Like, for example, paintings on a banana leaf from thousands and thousands of years ago, to somebody recording in a booth, an artist recording in a booth today. Like, both of those still have such a big cultural impact to this day. Not the technology necessarily. Like the banana leaf is obsolete now.
Yeah.
But the art still resonates. And that's because I think what it fundamentally comes down to is art is meant to capture a human emotion, or is meant to invoke a human emotion. And regardless of if you think about thousands of years ago or now, emotions are still the same. It's still universal. Technology has changed, of course, but the art hasn't. Like, it has, but that central goal of art hasn't. And I think that's one thing people don't like appreciate enough when it comes to this type of things.
Yeah, man, it's like you were saying something, so I was searching it up kind of while we were talking. There's a quote out of the Dead Poets Society that I love, and that I came across like recently, like a week or two ago, that I kind of just forgot about, but it resonated at this point in my life so deeply with me. It was that it's the teacher, he's talking, Robin Williams' character, he's talking, and he says, and medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for.
No, exactly. And that's perfect, dude. Like, shout out Robin Williams. But
it's I think you're right, dude. Like, technology can become obsolete, but the central, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I get art, right? Like, I don't. I'm not a clever enough person. I don't go into art galleries and be like, clearly. I'm the sort of guy who, if something is considered a classic, but I don't like it, I just don't like it. You know, like if I don't, if it doesn't resonate, I'm just like, hey, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, um,
But I think that's what makes it really interesting, right? Like people like you can compare technology. You can say, okay, this one's helping humans more. This one's help. But with art, like you can something can be universally acclaimed. But if you don't like it, you don't like it.
and you
And
don't have to like it.
but
That's the cool thing.
and you don't have to like it. And but for other people, that exact same thing will become like invoke a completely different emotion.
Yeah.
Like for like with technology, if I have a better camera, I have a better camera. Like you can't make a worse
Yeah.
megapixel camera.
Like, what you gonna do about it? Yeah.
Yeah, like you can't. But with art, it's like for me, a simple green painting, just completely covered in green paint, can mean the world to me.
Yeah.
But to you, it can be like, what is this? This is a green painting, and that's it. That's the thing with art. It's universal, and you can't compare it. Like no matter what time period it's come from, no matter where it's come from, there's some type of thing with that art. There's some type of element in that art.
Yeah. And so you know, we're talking about that intersection. It's like let me relay a quick story. Like you obviously, we've lived together for almost ever, it feels like now. You know, like in my room at Waterloo, I love, like when I set up posters, I always set up posters of art, of like pieces of art that I really admire. And it's recent. It's like, I'm not pretending I've been doing this since I was 12. Like before that, it was Assassin's Creed posters. Even now it is, actually.
Yeah, that's pretty dope.
But like recently I started doing that, and I started doing that because I realized how much more creative and motivated it made me feel in my engineering work. When I was sitting in my room and I'd look at these paintings. And so one of my favorite paintings of all time is The Kiss by Klimt, right? Gustav Klimt. And it's funny because like at one point in my life, when I first saw it, I was like, I don't get it. Like, I ain't about it. But as I got older and stuff changed in my life, it became so close to me. But it's cool how we were just talking about how like one person can like it and another can't. But sometimes, dude, like the same piece of art at different parts in your life can mean so much more, so much less to you. Like I remember the first time I read Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, sorry.
Yeah.
I was like, what the hell is this? This is whack. I think I was in like grade 7 when I read it. I picked it up at the back of like Weeb's class, and I was just like, Weeb was our teacher, by the way, Mr. Weeb. And I was like, I need something to read during quiet reading hours or whatever. And I was like, I can't stop reading it, but it's whack. And then I reread it in grade 11 or 12 when I was the same age as the main character. And I was just like, this is one of my favorite books of all time now.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Like even like for example with Shakespeare, right? That's something, a lot of kids get forced upon to read. But a lot of people don't like because of that. But if you actually take time to appreciate what this guy was doing, and just for the sake of conversation, believe that your English teacher is actually telling you he decided to do all these things. Yeah. Like, Shakespeare did this to represent death. Okay, whatever. Shakespeare did this. Like, if you just on surface level just take that for fact, it's insane. It's absolutely insane what is happening in these stories and the amount of emotion that Shakespeare captured, like with a skull, like with a monologue and a skull. This guy talked about universal traits like death, life, existence.
It's like, what's cool about it, and this is something that that I was just talking to with Vyom last night, right? So to give context to anyone listening to this podcast, we just released our first ever short film. It's entitled Exam Day. It's on YouTube. Please go watch it. And what I was talking to him about last night is how I think what makes excellent writing is that you don't fully understand what you've written when you write it. But when you look back on it and you start to try and understand your own thoughts, you understand yourself through what you put down on the page, you start seeing what you were trying to say. And so when we were talking about English class, how, your teacher's making it up, like I used to think that too until I realized that I really don't think they were making it up. I think the great art it comes from somewhere like outside of your body. It depends on who you talk to. I think it comes from God, man. I think it comes from something like the universe itself, and you're this vessel for this minute, and you speak these things, but you don't fully understand it until you try to think about it. And that's why like artists and people in the arts are actually excellent critical thinkers, a lot of them, because, or at least people who are really serious about it, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're trying to analyze and understand, why did I write that? What was I trying to say? Where did this message from my psyche come from? And then it gets all like psychological and all that, and it's very interesting. But to round that conversation all the way back around to where we started about technology, it's like, isn't that kind of what you want from technology? You want something that feels completely intuitive and like the most natural thing ever.
It's human.
It's human. But then when you start dissecting it, you really start analyzing it, it's beautifully complex. And so art, and that's why, like an iPhone and something, I've never really thought of it like that. Like you just said, like an iPhone is art, but that's a really cool way to look at it. I think I agree with you. It is, right? And we exist in such a fascinating, exciting time to be a young anything, to be honest, like a young creative, a young engineer. I don't think those are mutually exclusive, but because we're existing in this time when technology is, I don't want to phrase this, technology is becoming more and more independent, and it's in some ways becoming more and more scary, right? With artificial intelligence and automation, and a lot of people are insecure about their jobs and that stuff, and we are almost growing more and more distrustful of technology while simultaneously becoming more and more dependent on it. And I think, personally, what's going to happen in the next couple of years is that the arts are going to see a massive renaissance. Like, I mean massive. Because people are going to need to be reassured of their humanity. In the face of technology that can really take care of itself and develop itself and all that sort of stuff, we're going to want to separate from it and remember that we're not the same. And the only way we can really do that is through art. And I think it's incumbent upon us as a young generation of makers and creators to really be cognizant of that, right? Like my interest in biomedical and biomechanics stems from the fact that I'm terrified of the way I see it going with artificial intelligence and chips in our brains and stuff. So instead of sitting back and like complaining about it, I would love to be part of the solution to that. Or I'd love to be part of the first wave that's developing that, so I can see it developed in a way that would make me comfortable, or in a way that I would want to share with my kids one day, Yeah.
No, and I think you hit on the spot, like with artificial intelligence and automation. So that's very robotic things, right? That's something that you don't, like you're saying, with humanity, you do, like, it's completely different. Sorry, let me gather my thoughts a little bit. But
it doesn't feel like natural, is my point, right? Like I think, and it doesn't feel like part of us. It feels like something that I think about so much is, people always talk about detoxing or unplugging, and it's kind of like, why, right? I totally understand it. I feel like that a lot. Like I wish dude, if it was up to me, I'd have a flip phone, and I would be off the grid, and everyone I loved would be totally cool with that. But the thing is that it feels like we need to get away from it because it feels so artificial. A screen and the glass and it's all external. And imagine a world where we could merge nature and technology, and in a way that feels unobtrusive, right? That's the future of technology that excites me. I'm a huge proponent of biomimicry and kind of the work of like Neri Oxman, where they're doing so much work in using the biological natural world and using that to inform design. And dude, that is such a cool idea to me. Like, instead of coming up with stuff that's synthetic, like, we should use the natural world as the basis of our designs. So if you want to make a
Mm-hmm.
plane that can hover and spot, look at a hummingbird. How did they do it? Right? That's biomimicry.
Yep. Yep.
And just this conversation we're having about like, how technology can feel so distant from us. I think that's where the role of art comes in. That we find a way to express our humanity, and at the intersection of art and science, or the humanities and engineering, that's really where I think the future is. And it's interesting because, when I started working at Apple, I'll be 100% honest, I never was a huge Steve Jobs guy. I thought he was cool, but I didn't know much about him. And I started reading about him when I joined, and I remember reading a quote of his that said that. He said that I'm trying to stand at the intersection of the humanities and the sciences. And dude, it sent like chills up my back because I never heard it articulated so potently.
Mm-hmm.
So man, it's just an exciting time, dude. It's an exciting time.
And I mean, nature's had thousands of years to solve these. That's the thing, right? Like people end up thinking, oh, how can I solve this? How can I solve this? And they just like close themselves off, start thinking, okay, what are different solutions? But let's look outside, man. Like nature has solved so many of these issues that we face
Dude,
right now.
Nature has
in such unique ways.
Nature has solved every issue. Otherwise, we'd all be dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Like anything that was worth solving, nature solves, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, and like we've only been here for a couple thousand years as humans, but like nature's been here for a while.
Yeah.
So nature knows, man. Nature knows.
And like we're part of it. So, and that's why, like for me, we were talking earlier about what the future holds for me. I'm very excited and terrified, but by companies like Neuralink. Like that's somewhere that I would really be interested in pursuing an internship or work for a while, or a Boston Dynamics, but really more like Neuralink is more of my field of interest. Boston Dynamics would just be a flex, because I think they're doing work that is, like we're living in a weird time right now, right, with coronavirus, and I think if coronavirus has showed us anything, it showed us we are unbelievably unprepared. And B, that our technology, and this is a quote I'm stealing from Hugh Hare, who's a phenomenally inspiring and just like if you're listening to this and you're actually interested, search him up. He works at the MIT Media Lab, designer, and he talked about because he works in the field of disabled technology, and he was talking about how people aren't disabled, our technology just isn't enabled enough. But what I'm trying to say is that COVID has really shown us that our technology is not prepared. It's not at the level it needs to be, despite we think we've solved all these awesome problems. And it's because I really think it's the next wave. I think space and health are where that's where we need all of the most innovative, inspiring, brilliant minds. Elon Musk got space, and Bill Gates is leading the charge on health, but we really need people in those spaces as engineers and creatives to be able to attack the problems that we're going to face in the next couple of years.
And I think so. The thing with those spaces specifically, I think the biggest challenge for them right now is just like, where does the money lie? Because right now, most of the money lies in consumer products or just general applications, stuff like that. And these spaces are lacking in the amount of money they can provide. But like you're saying, I think I tend to agree with you too, that those are going to be the two most important spaces coming up, space and health. And the money will come there, but I think that the next step for it is somebody has to find out a way of making it profitable in the short term, so those minds will be more obligated to join.
And like that's exactly where I think, like, I don't think it's at all ridiculous to say, like, that's where we step in. Why can't we be the ones who do that, right? Like, you're talking about starting a startup, and like I've always been 100% about that, because I'm like, bro, like, why? Everyone's like, oh, we have to wait till Elon Musk or one of these billionaires does it. Bro, how did they become billionaires? They followed their gut.
They saw a problem and they did it.
And this traces all the way back to the conversation we had at the beginning of the podcast, where they followed their gut. They saw
Yeah.
something, they believed it. People said that makes no sense, and they're like, no, I think it does, and they just went for it. And so it's like everyone wants to be on Elon Musk and stuff, but nobody wants to do the thing that is necessary to do that, which is do the hard, scary work of following your gut.
I think it's honestly like, so recently I was listening to the Joe Rogan
Yeah.
podcast with Elon, and it's fascinating to me his mindset when it came to the Boring project and like
Yeah.
the Boring Company. And just to give some like background on that for our viewers, if you don't know, the Boring Company is essentially a project that a company that Elon Musk opened to dig tunnels underneath LA right now to solve traffic issues. So you can hyper accelerate in that tunnel to 260, 270 kilometers per hour, and the moment you get to the end of the tunnel, you come out. So should alleviate traffic problem. That's what the goal is. And that was his mentality. His mentality was when he was talking to the Joe Rogan podcast, his whole thing was that he was talking about I live in LA. I solve traffic as a problem. So I'm like, how do we fix it? And then he just started digging a hole. That's literally how he started. He's like, he called up one of his engineers at SpaceX, and he's like, hey, I think traffic is a problem in LA, and I think this is the way we can fix it just by digging underground holes and hyper accelerating cars. Are you down? And he's like, yes. And then they just start digging a hole and to try it out. Like nobody, everybody's like, are you crazy? Everybody's like, what are you talking about? How are you going to start randomly digging a hole? But everybody still complains about traffic, right? So it's not only about identifying issues, but it's about actually acting upon them. And that's one thing that separates these entrepreneurs from the rest of the people,
there's
like
a
the
great
Elon Musk
quote
of the
here
world.
by Mr. Ronnie Coleman, who was I think the 3-time Mr. Olympia. He said, everybody want to look big, but ain't nobody want to lift no heavy ass weight. But I think it applies, really.
No, there you go. That's it. That's the mentality, right? That's what separates. Like Elon Musk decided to drop out of Stanford of his PhD because he wanted to get on the internet bubble. And that's what he wanted to do, and that's what he did. I think that's coming back to the beginning of the conversation, like before, he just went with his gut. He thought, you know what, this is a good opportunity. I want to capitalize on it, and that's what these entrepreneurs do. They don't only identify the issue or identify what they want to do; they actually act upon it. And they have to start from somewhere. Everybody has to start from somewhere. Like when Elon invested in Tesla, I guarantee people were saying you're crazy. Electric vehicles have no future, especially in a space where GM and a bunch of other gas vehicles own the whole entire space. How are you going to make electric? And now they're in the forefront. They're
I think it's that mix between, we're talking about all the fluffy, like cool stuff, which is like, follow your gut, go do it. But the other side of it is you have to commit to becoming disgustingly good at what you do. Like you have to master your craft. And like, let me be clear about that. Earlier when I talked about, I went with my gut and I just went with it. Like, yes. And that was part of it for me, like not taking a co-op term, but I was also working like 12 hours a day at the lab and then rehearsing at night. Like it was, if I think if you make the decision to go with your gut, you have to commit 100% because it's do or die, right? Like I know that if I choose after university to go into film, theater, acting, the arts, I can't just be like, now I can kind of like lay back and I can just go pursue the arts. It's like, nah, bro, like you gotta go, right? Because that's the other side of it. You have to commit to becoming a master of your craft. But the cool thing is you get to choose the game. You get to decide what the craft is that you're going to pursue. And that's where I feel like a lot of people, again, this sounds like, I hate how preachy this sounds. I don't mean it at all to be preachy. I'm just sharing my own experiences. Like I had to decide what craft I wanted to master. And I just realized I didn't have to. Right now, I'm young enough that I don't have to choose one. I don't have to choose engineering or art. I can do both of them. And then eventually, you have to turn your kind of pluripotentiality into focus into one specific thing. But, that's a decision that you can make with time. because that's a big decision. That's a big commitment.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting to see what the future will hold. But yeah, no, man. I guess to finish it off, let's talk about. Now we're talking about art. Let's talk about some of your favorite art forms and contemporary artists. I know you sent some Instagram pages. You really liked some of the art they were doing in the past. So just talk about some of the stuff you're excited about in the art space.
So you mean just like across all the different forms of art and stuff?
Yeah, sure. Just things you're excited about in art.
Doesn't matter. I mean, let me preface this by saying I'm in no way, shape, or form like a art connoisseur. Like I'm not a. I know a lot of people who might listen to this might actually be in the arts and actually know what's happening in that space, and I am not that person. I'm just a consumer. If I like something, I like it. But like, so my favorite medium of art that I resonate with is definitely film and theater. So like within that space, obviously I'm like a theater geek. Like I'm very excited by Lin-Manuel Miranda and stuff, and that's like the most mainstream theater that someone could be excited about, because that's what I am, right? I'm not super educated in theater, but I really I'm always excited by the stuff he puts out. Recently, I honestly didn't know about him until probably in the past year, when I actually went to go watch his show a couple months ago, and it just blew my mind. But anyway, within film, man, that's always a tough one. My favorite director at this point in time is Francis Ford Coppola. The Godfather movie,
the classic,
favorite. And obviously Martin Scorsese and all that. I'm really excited by that. But then, there are other forms of art that I find really cool and intriguing. That, like, it's interesting. The most inspiring form of art to me is actually music. And to me, like, I'm really inspired and excited by people like D Smoke, a rapper who's coming up, and he's gaining a lot of notoriety. And like, something about rap and when you listen to a good rapper, dude, when you listen to someone with a command over their art, that is like J. Cole. When you listen to J. Cole rap, it is like hair raising.
I think his storytelling ability is bar none, in my opinion, or it's at the very top level.
Yeah,
and I think that's really what separates him as an amazing rapper.
And like, that form of art is so inspiring to me when it's done well. So like, and I feel like D Smoke is the next J. Cole. Hot take. But then within other forms, like I'm really also inspired by design. I love beautiful design, and like a nice render, I'm like, ooh.
Yeah.
I really like the work of like Oki Sato. He's a Japanese industrial designer. He runs this page on Instagram called Nendo, if you're into that. I just started following an Instagram page called Design Burger.
Design Burger, all right.
Yeah, and it just brings together works by a lot of different designers, and I just think industrial design is like the coolest thing. Like I love that stuff, and I'm only recently getting into it. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but some of the stuff.
That's good, man. It was a pretty open-ended question, but that's pretty good. I mean, I think one film group I'm pretty excited about is A24. I mean, some of their stuff's been pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds really mainstream now, but
no, I mean, but here's the thing about mainstream, right? Like, I'll be the first to be like, oh, you got to be careful with mainstream, but like, it's mainstream for a reason, right? Like, it's good. It's usually good, and it's okay. Let me put it like this: it's usually good enough, which cannot always be a good thing, but it's easily accessible, and that's how people start. Like I said, I was deep in theater, and then I stopped being in theater at all, and now I'm getting back into it. Yeah. So of course I'm gonna start with what's accessible, bro. It's like mainstream stuff. That's cool. I like it. It's a good way in.
Exactly. And I think with mainstream stuff, it's like, I think with some of the more off-brand stuff, you have to actually gain a good understanding to appreciate it a lot more.
Exactly.
So mainstream's like the entry into that, where it's not too much to digest. It's playing more to the basic emotions that we all have.
Yeah.
Rather than getting very advanced with it, where you have to have some type of deep knowledge.
As we're talking about this, something else that I've recently weirdly, but recently getting into that I'm finding really cool
What's up?
is fashion, bro. Like,
Fashion. All right.
yeah, like Alexander McQueen. I watched a documentary about him
Yeah.
and his work, and I thought that was really cool. And like Virgil Abloh and stuff, and some of the like he's the he worked with Kanye, and now he's the head of Louis Vuitton,
Damn.
and
Okay.
he's the guy who everyone mentions in their rap songs. Like, you know, when in Life Is Good, when Drake is like, Virgil got the paddock on my rip doing front flip. So
Sure.
I mean, I'm not a rapper, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I'm not a
Yeah,
rapper.
he's talking about Virgil Abloh, and
Oh, okay.
like I really like that sort of stuff. I'm really getting into that as well. So
Yeah.
I don't know, man. And I think like art that's challenging, I'm really getting into that. Like when it comes to visual art, like paintings and stuff, I'm really into the romantics, like the romantic era.
Yeah.
That I find that stuff very inspiring. It resonates with me. Like there's a painting, it might literally be just called "Guy in Front of Clouds" or something. But he's standing at the top of this mountain,
Yeah.
and there are all these clouds in front of him. That's one of my favorite paintings nowadays. I think that's so cool.
Yeah.
And I'm really, another thing I've got into a lot recently is sculpture.
Your sculptures are insane, man. I'm 100% with you on sculptures.
Sculptures and woodworking. There's something in my life about like, for me, I'm discovering a passion with working with my hands. Like even now for how do I say this? Never mind, I can't talk about it.
Okay.
But some of the work, like for me, like I picked up woodworking as a passion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Sculpture, I would love to get into sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
There's
No.
something really cool about bringing out a piece of art as though it already exists. I
Yeah.
think that's very indicative of like what I'm trying to do with my life. I don't really believe in finding yourself. I really believe more in like discovering yourself or creating yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, not discovering yourself. I mean creating yourself. And so like something about sculpture speaks deeply to me about that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty like with paintings and sculptures that frozen moment of time that they
Yeah,
represent.
man. It's like Michelangelo, bro. You look at Michelangelo's stuff and like it's so celebrated and mainstream that sometimes it's easy to forget how phenomenally good it is.
Yeah.
But you know, to veer off a little bit, you know another art form I'm really into?
What's up?
Martial arts, bro.
Martial arts, yeah.
I straight up count them as art. Like I actually do. Like when I watch UFC and stuff, you know I'm a big fan of that. I genuinely see it as an art form, as a weird sort of performance art, but I resonate with it. I was I was into combat as a young guy. I was did taekwondo since I was like 5, and then I got into wrestling and stuff. And recently I returned back to martial arts like wrestling and kickboxing, and I'm like obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same idea, right? Like the more and more you get into any single branch or speciality of life, like engineering or anything, I think to find balance for the other parts of who you are, you need to explore the kind of extremes in another way. So for me, as I became more and more of an engineer, I became more and more of an artist. And as I became more and more stagnant in some ways, right? When you're working and all, the activities that made me feel good and inspired me and like really gave me rhythm ended up being more and more extreme. And now I'm wrestling and like kickboxing and like twice a day and stuff. It just feels good, man.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like, I tend to agree with you that arts, like martial arts is an art form because it's the way, it's how you move your body. Like, and yeah, I don't
know. no, dude. For like I said at the beginning, the thing that inspired me to get into engineering was movement. I meant like biological movement. I meant like kinesiology was my second choice, but I thought it'd be more interesting to explore it through an engineering perspective. Because I'm a dancer, right? Like I come from a dancing background. I come from martial arts. Like movement, bodily movement, activity has always been a huge part of my life. I would never call myself an athlete, but I was good at what I did, and it was meditative for me, man. It was inspiring when you're dancing or whether you're wrestling or when you're, engaged in some sort of physical activity, there's something beautiful about it that I kind of wanted to explore through engineering.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll still get a chance to.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good intersection between the two. So, yeah, let's see what happens, man. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you. Hopefully we'll see you sometime in the future as well.
100%, man. I'm happy I could support. You're doing good work, man. This is actually pretty solid. I was listening to some of the other episodes and stuff. I think you chose the perfect name, the Almost Dropouts.
Pretty indicative.
Because of how close our close friend group has almost gotten there for each of us. But like I think this is just a sick initiative, dude, to be able to reach out and use your platform to share different stories and perspectives. Like, I'm proud of you, man. This is really cool.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And honestly, that's what it is for me. Just, I think there's so many interesting perspectives to talk about. And why not, man? Why not make some content? If people resonate with it, they resonate with it. If not, maybe in 20 years, I'll enjoy listening to it again, man.
I feel that. That's what the YouTube channel is about too, right? Like, this is my boy, though. If you're listening to this is my boy. This is my day one. We grew up together.
So everybody, it's not everybody, but if you want to, sub to Sid's channel. It's great stuff. Some more discussions on there, some vlogs on there, which are really sick. I make a special appearance on some, so that's
you're in a lot of you're in a lot of those podcasts. They're recorded. They're video podcasts about us just talking about different funny stories we've had. Sometimes talking about serious stuff like life goals and that sort of stuff. There's videos about me just talking about ideas I have, like we did today, but talking to myself, unfortunately. And yeah, they're vlogs. There's some entertaining stuff. So it's just my name, Siddharth Kumar, SIDDHARTH, space KUMAR.
Nice. I'll throw a link wherever I can. I don't know if Spotify has links, but at least on YouTube I will.
Yeah,
and LinkedIn stuff. So
and if you guys get that far, we would absolutely love for you to watch and support if you find it valuable. The movie we just released, it's called Exam Day. You can find it on YouTube. Just type it in. Daivik also makes a special appearance in that.
Yo, I'm throwing frisbee in, I think, around 4 minutes. Check out my frisbee game is amazing.
New actor on the block, bro.
But I hope you really I hope you enjoyed this. It was a little different, but I think the conversation is a nice one to have, and I think it's sort of different compared to what the other ones are like. So I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one. We have a couple more coming up. Coronavirus and quarantine is giving me a lot more time, so I'm going to try recording some and sharing some other perspectives. But as usual, take care and see you soon. Bye.